either through live stream on Facebook or through YouTube through the Hex Education channel. If you're watching us there, give us a like and subscribe. We post regularly. We have 2 more episodes coming in this season. So today we're going to be following the same format that we've been following, where we have a guest interviewer, a sort of surprise interviewer. None of us know the questions. I'm a little terrified of that. None of us know the topic even. But our guest today is Christian Day. So Christian Day is the co-owner of Hex and Omen. Both stores exist in Salem, Massachusetts, and here in New Orleans. He is also the author of The Witch's Book of the Dead, which was recently re-released in a revised and expanded version through Warlock Press, which he also co-guides. And he is also, with Brian, the sort of operator of 2 incredible festivals, actually more than 2. But one of them is coming up, which is WitchCon, which is coming up here in February. If you want more information about that, you can find it at witchcon.com. I think all of us are teaching, right?
We are.
Yeah. So everybody on this call will be teaching at WitchCon, along with an incredible array of presenters. It really is just an amazing cast of people.
More than 90 presenters.
Yeah. But yes, we're going to follow our normal format. So I'm going to pass it off to Brian, who's going to take us through the occult news. What's going on in the world?
Well, I do have to take my talking points out and hope I can read them. So I'm wearing sunglasses because I'm just very fashionable today. So
I want to know the news. I haven't heard any news.
Well, okay, so the first one I found was one that I've talked about actually before, I believe on another episode, I think, but this was more involved. So apparently there's been more research in it. So the topic started out with the witch trials in America in Connecticut, which actually went on from 1647 to 1663, which is long before Salem, Massachusetts, which was 1692. And during this period of the Connecticut witch trials, 11 people were executed and many more prosecuted. So they were also hung, as far as I know, just like the witches in, the accused witches in Salem, Massachusetts. But this is just the beginning of the story. So I found it very interesting that the last case, well, first of all, there was a case in 1716 in Connecticut. So way after the last execution in 1663, in 1716, there was a state court case where a Dr. Alexander Williamson was accused of practicing witchcraft on one of his clients who was charging him with witchcraft. And the state actually was, enduring this case. The judge did dismiss it. But it's interesting that, that happened. Was this the last time in Connecticut? No, it was not. The last case was actually in 1742.
That is late.
It was not a state case at this point. This was a civil case. And in this case, and this is the one I found the weirdest. So a man accused a woman of witchcraft in Connecticut. So she sued him because he was accusing her of witchcraft. The judge dismissed the case and made her pay for his legal fees. So I'm assuming the judge just thought it was a frivolous case to begin with. But the reality is this man was publicly slandering her as a witch, and he got away with it, and she had to pay his fees for protesting it. So as far as I know, 1742 is the last official witchcraft case in this country, which is really not that long ago. If you think about it. So witches of Connecticut, you have a history there that's older than Salem, Massachusetts, just not as famous. So that was the first one. The second one is something I pinched off the Wild Hunt, which is something that a lot of people in the communities are aware of, but I often like to look for new discoveries and things like that. So I love to look for what's going on in the drama, but all the drama I could find was a little dated at this point. Yeah. So I wasn't really interested in it. It was stuff you guys have already talked about. If there's something juicy going on currently, sure. But in this particular case, this is actually quite fascinating. And this is the one I actually really need the notes for, is the dates is what I need the notes for. So a Dr. Boyne was researching a letter from the 4th century in the Roman Empire. And in this letter that they found in 1733, or these, correspondences, as they weren't called letters then. This was, these correspondences were by the Emperor Constantine. Now, this is in the 4th century, and there may have been more than one Emperor Constantine, but the one they didn't say, if there was a different one. He is writing to a small village in Italy because this village had requested that they could have their own festivals, in certain festivals that apparently were governed by Rome, that people used to have to travel, but it was a very hard travel for them. So they were asking for, I guess, special rights to be able to perform the festivals in their town. And Constantine granted this on the condition that they built a temple to his ancestors. Now, what's important about this is when Rome was already supposed to be Christian. Mm-hmm. That's what makes this an interesting thing. So the Roman Empire was officially declared a Christian state in 380 by... I knew you were going to have
Theodosius.
Theodosius. I was like, I believe I was going to tell them that. So Theodosius. So the entire hypothesis that this guy was giving a talk about, Dr. Bowen, was that the Roman Empire did not convert as quickly as academia has already proclaimed, and he really got a lot of heads turning. So what makes it even more fun is that Dr. Bowen and his team found this temple. So that's actually the new discovery. So he's analyzing these letters. He went and found the temple and proved a temple was constructed to this emperor's ancestors after Christianity was already considered the official religion of Rome. Now, I know that there were other temples that were still in operation because I think they say the temple in Philae in Egypt was operating until the 4th century somewhere. Now, the 4th century is vague, but it is after the time that the government had said, we're all Christian, let's close all the pagan temples down. So you've got, let's close all the pagan temples down, but then you have an emperor saying, so what it demonstrates to us is, and I don't think it should be a surprise, that some of these emperors weren't as Christian as they professed.
Oh yeah,
so
definitely not Constantine.
Yes, so definitely they were, things were still going on. And I find this to be true throughout the world, and I find it very strange. You go to, part of it can be the imagination, but you go into Wales or you go into Ireland and these rural places. Yep. If you go into Europe in the rural places like Nijmegen or whatever like that, you can still see things there now. So you think, well, what was it like then? You know? And so I definitely I do believe that pre-Christian religion survived much longer than academia would like to proclaim, because we do everything with I'm not academia, but a dot and a T, and the sentence is over, and they're doing this based on statements, official laws being passed and things like that. But the common people, the peasantry, didn't follow those laws. And then the last thing that I was going to mention was obviously WitchCon, but Leva got that for me. So WitchCon is an online festival that's coming up in February. I believe the dates are the 16th, 17th, and 18th.
I think that's right.
And you can still buy tickets online at witchcon.com. And what's great about this is not only if you get to go live, it's amazing because we have basically like these meet and greet rooms all day long to where in between classes, people will pop on. That's where I usually am. And we just like hang out, drink wine, some people whiskey, some people coffee. And we talk about the occult. And that's my favorite part of WitchCon. But if you do buy tickets and you're not able to attend live, you can view all the classes at your leisure if you've purchased a ticket. So you can watch every class a month later, 2 months later. They're permanently accessible to anyone who buys a ticket. So
such a cool lineup this year.
That was my occult news segment, and I'm going to pass it on to Ellie for our occult demonstration.
Okay. I'm so excited to be back on Covendom. Thank you so much for watching us. So the occult demonstration, in my mind, is a thing that we show and do. So what popped in my mind was the witch's ladder. And immediately I had to look it up and realize that my view of the witch's ladder and the folklore or historical view are two different things. I was really thinking of probably more like spell cord work or sewing work or knitting work. But I did look at both things, and I'm going to show how I make kind of what I call a witch's ladder, but probably really is a spell cord. and say that the cord that was woven with feathers in it, black feathers, found in an attic in Somerset, England, in something, I don't know what time period they buy.
I'm not sure.
Medieval to modern era, really.
1878.
Yeah.
Okay, so it'd been there a
industrial.
while. And it had brooms beside it and a chair, a rocking chair. So
We've
folklorists,
actually found them in bogs.
yeah, in Italy.
They're like witches' bottles. They were very common in England.
But when they discovered that one in Somerset, they sent the idea to Charles Godfrey Leyland, who immediately said, let me ask my Italian witches contacts. And they said, oh, yes, it's a common thing. So then Brian said, well, the witch's ladder is to kill people. And I was like, well, I'm so glad I know that now. And I will work to...
In folklore, that was usually considered something nefarious, yeah.
to not do it, quite the way I had been
Magical
doing it.
murder. Welcome.
But I'm a sewer. I love knotting and sewing, and so I've always made little things, and I want to show how I do it. This is a piece of wood with a small screw or nail in it. And I like to make these cords. I like to choose different fibers from different places. One year I went to Scotland, Isle of Mull, and I bought a big skein of unbleached sheep's fur yarn. And I brought it home and I dyed it with vegetable dyes, different colors, and I still have many pieces. And I use that as like a foundation for sometimes my cord work or knot work. And so I believe that when we tie and work with threads, we put our mind into the tying and the work in a real repetitive way, maybe even like saying a rosary, because you're tying and thinking and knotting and smoothing and tying and knotting. So I made this one. Here's my key that I tied in. It's 3 different kinds of fiber, a silk cord, a cotton twine, and a really rough hemp packaging cord. I didn't have a mindset for this, but I was saying, by night and day I work my will, by night and day I think I will. And this charm I was making to open doors for me. So I put a key on it, tied it in as I was going. Then I put a wishbone on it, a chicken wishbone on it, because I thought that was a great idea to open doors and make a wish. And then I have pieces of bamboo that I grow and cut myself, and that's for Saturn strength and building and kind of power. And I kept tying it and saying my charms. And the idea behind a cord or ladder, I might even use either word, is that you're going to build your intentions into this made tied cord, and then you're going to take it off. I'm just saying I like this. I can hold it between my knees too and really make anything on that. And then you want to hang it where it's effective, on the fence of a person that you're trying to get rid of a boss that you don't like.
You're not helping the case.
Right. You want to hang that in the inside of their office somewhere behind a coat where they never see it. Maybe you want to help your child with their grades and you put it behind their backpack or tie it on yourself.
Poor Harriet.
I know, poor Harriet.
I'm sorry, Harriet.
Tie it on yourself. Or tie
What's
it
the string on your backpack? I have no idea.
So I'm challenging everyone out there to get some fibers and some objects and start knotting and tying your intentions into a cord and then do your magic that way. I have one more thing to say. I had a sweet person come in the shop, a fan of us who had watched every single Covendom show. Q, I will call them Q. And they got a reading from me and they hugged me and we took pictures together and they were adorable. And I wanted to just shout out. And I got another message today from a fan. Wow, I'm in great shape
like you're
right
famous.
now. I know,
Yeah.
I'm famous. And that you guys are reaching out in person and saying, hey, I watch you and I'm learning a lot. And I want to say to all of you, we love you and we thank you so much for working with us in excellent witchcraft work. Blessed blessings. That's my story.
It was lovely. Thank you, Ellie. I also want to say we see all of your comments, whether you are entering them through Facebook or you're watching us on YouTube. We do see them. And so I want to, say hello to everybody. I see Uncle Birch. I see Loretta. Thank you, Devil Brian. You've been watching for a while, but we do see all your comments. And after we bring Christian on, he's going to be asking us questions. We'll each answer from our own perspective. But we are going to open up the show after a while to call-ins and to questions within the comments. We love call-ins. It's a call-in show. If you're brave enough, the number's on your screen, but we won't. I'll let you know when the
Devil
phones
Brian
are
was
open.
our first call-in and our only video call-in.
Yes, that's true.
We had the video call-in.
That's true. It was a video
He
call-in.
is. I love that.
Yeah. And so if you do want to call in, we'll let you know when the phones are open and the number's on your screen. It's 309 Goddess, also 309-463-3377. So I'm going to bring Christian on in just a second. Is everybody ready?
I think we're ready.
Okay, give me one moment.
Do we have enough alcohol?
I'm very nervous. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Okay, can you hear us?
We can't hear him.
We can't hear Christian.
Did you unmute him?
No, give me one moment.
Me?
Oh, he got
There
it.
he goes.
You got it. There he is. Blessed be, Christian. Welcome to Covendom.
Did I get something in my teeth? Yeah, hold on. I've just been eating steak. Good evening, everyone. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We're all just
So
sitting
what
there.
is this week's ambush interview?
The sanctimony of Satan.
Okay. I mean, is that seriously your topic, Christian?
We thought about it. That's kind of, we didn't imagine.
Okay, here we go. All right, well, bedazzle us with your first question.
This week's topic,
He was kidding.
defining witchcraft.
Oh, you were? I thought he was
I
tired.
thought he was being serious for a second. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to talk about
And I'm
Satanism.
married to the man. All right, go ahead.
You really think I
Yes.
I thought you would.
Yes, you had me.
We all thought-
7 questions
I
on
was
the
like,
sanctimony
A
of
bit
Satan?
weird, but let's go. Let's do this.
So, okay, this week's topic is, and it came out of some discussions I've been having on my Facebook about my own sort of epiphanies in this area. And so I came up with the topic, defining witchcraft as religion.
Ooh. I like this topic, actually.
I know, I saw it because it's like the title of my upcoming book, so I did I spy that. All right.
Yeah, I like that. Good topic.
So I
Right,
might be prejudiced. Anyway, so throw your questions.
Yeah, what's your first question?
Did you look at the questions?
No, I said throw your questions.
No, we're not allowed to look.
Yeah, but where did you see you saw it?
I saw it on your wall that you were talking about the religion of witchcraft.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. All right.
I didn't
I'm
know
like,
what the topic was going to
Okay.
be. Yeah.
all right. As long as you're not cheating, it's not fair.
No,
Okay, so the first question is a pretty basic one. Some of them get kind of deep, but why do you consider witchcraft to be a religion?
who wants to start? Or who do you want to ask?
Yeah, you get a pick, Christian.
Oh, I get to pick. Well, I will pick. God, I don't even know if I want to say this, but I'm going to pick the most fanatical of the three.
Good luck picking.
Of course, Levi. Theologically, I think the most fanatical. Maybe not.
Why do
Sure if
I?
that's true on this subject.
I know, right? Why do I call religion why do I call witchcraft a religion? Well, because it is. Now here's the thing. I know that's not a very strong answer, but here's the thing. I'm going to start out in a weird way because I know because Brian is much more passionate and informed about the history of religious witchcraft.
Literally the title of my book.
And you're just like, you're very into the foundational sort of, movements in England that started this as an initiatory
Correct.
religion. So I'm going to take it from a different
Occasionally I
angle.
have bouts of reality.
But I'm going to take it from a different angle. I think a lot of people in the modern world use the word religion in a way that is divorced from how it was used historically. I think people think of religion as a solely Abrahamic kind of thing. And they think of it solely as something that is a set of propositions that you either believe or you do not. It's divorced from praxis. This is a view that comes from Protestants, right? This comes from the Protestant Reformation, where there was this idea that you're Reformed, but I'm a Lutheran, and he's an Anglican, and this is a Quaker, and we are these things because we have these incredibly defined creedal commitments, or non-creedal commitments in the case of Quakers. That's a weird way to talk about religion, frankly. And I think if you look at how academics talk about religion, they talk more about doing religion. And so Gardnerians and Alexandrians, in my opinion, are doing religion, right? Even if it's done in a way that does not mimic or look like or feel like an Abrahamic religion or a Dharmic religion, doesn't matter. You're still engaging in religion. And I would say that even somebody who calls themselves an atheist but practices witchcraft is still doing religion. If you're buying crystals and putting your intent into them and letting them bake in the sun so that something happens, you're doing religion, right? Magic has always been woven into religious belief throughout history, and this weird dichotomy of trying to unknit everything into, well, the Christians are religious, but the witches are different. The witches are praxis, or the witches are orthopraxy, and these are unhelpful sort of modern terms that come from the Reformation. We're doing religion. And I think Druids are doing religion. And I think, contemporary pagans are doing religion. They're just doing it in different ways or in ways that are not dominant. But I think I would challenge the whole conversation, Christian, around religion in the sense that I think people use the word with no kind of context, with no concept of what it meant historically. We would look back at the pagans of Rome and Greece, and would you call that? I mean, that was religion, but they didn't have the same sort of creedal commit. What creedal commitments did a worshiper of Mars have in Rome? They didn't have a Nicene Creed. They didn't have a liturgy that was, standardized unless you were in the state cult. So yeah, I would say, of course we're doing religion. We're praying, we're worshiping gods to raise power in a liturgical environment. How is that not religious? It's just silly, right? So that would be my answer.
Do we just go down the line now?
Yeah, that works.
So Levi answered it very well. There's three things I want to say about it to try to, because I'm writing an entire book on the subject, so I could go on forever, right? First, it legally is recognized as a religion in the United States, the United Kingdom, and several other locations in Europe. Whether they call it witchcraft or Wicca or whatever. It was actually a part of the handbook in the United States military that witchcraft was considered a religion, and the can't think of the name right now for the clergy and the military. Chaplain's handbook actually addressed it. They have removed that handbook entirely nowadays, but it was there in the 90s and was actually used as an instrument to make the IRS accept alternative religions, which is probably why they removed it. So that's one fact. It's just legally considered a religion. You can start a witchcraft church and have it 501c3 recognized. So it's legally considered a religion. So to me, that should end the debate, period. The second thing I'm going to say is that, no one would be practicing contemporary witchcraft without the witchcraft revival of the 1950s, which was brought to you by a man named Gerald Brosier Gardner, who called witchcraft a religion. What's more important is so did all of his contemporaries and even his detractors. So all of the original founding members of the movement of witchcraft called it a religion. It was called a religion by Charles Cardell. It was called a religion by Robert Cochrane. It was called a religion by Sybil Leek, none of whom are connected to Gerald Gardner in any set way. It was called a religion by Alex and Maxine Sanders, and there were references of it being a religion to academics. Now, we know this is flawed because the reality of it is we realize that there was no ancient religion called witchcraft. But none of these people, well, for the most part, most of these people weren't exactly saying that. Witchcraft is an English word, so it does not predate England. It does not predate the English language. What we do as witches, what we practice, who we worship, and what we believe does predate the word witch. So that's an entirely different topic that will be in my book that I can't do here. So I'd say that all these facts combined, it also just fits the definition of a religion. We do have sacred texts. It's called the Book of Shadows, the Book of Shadows, the book. We have sacred texts. We have particular gods. We have a set of ethical practices, and we have a set of rituals, and we have a priesthood. There is no form of the modern idea of religion that we don't actually dot the I and cross the T on.
Yep.
So I don't really think there's any room for debate. What it does come down to is what Levi is sort of saying, is people use the word religion differently, people use the word witch differently. So because the word witch also belongs in mythology, fantasy, a lot of fantasy. There are people out there who get all their witchcraft from movies and TV shows. Like, it's just true.
And TikTok.
There's people out there who probably think they're zombies. It is what it is. So because of this, you have this sort of idea through the Christians that witchcraft had the definition of baneful magic as well. So anyone who practiced evil magic was a witch. And this is where we get the term ritual witchcraft and operative witchcraft from. Ellie calls it religious witchcraft, not to steal your thunder, but Margaret Murray coined it ritual witchcraft, and operative witchcraft. And I sort of get what they're saying there, but at the same time, the church history never defined witchcraft as magic. Witchcraft was always going to the devil, going to the goddess, or going to the fairies, making pacts, and it had a religious synchronicity. So even if it was the religion of the devil, it was historically always viewed as a religion.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I have a completely different kind of space I'm going to come with my answer. In being raised in the South in childhood, I observed and was around other family members who went to church, prayed to God, did good works according to their moral compass, and asked for what they needed from a divine source. So my parents were secular, and we did not go to church as children. But I had these other beings that showed up for me, Egyptian beings, Greek and Roman beings, American Indian beings. And I started to build relationships with them and pray to
Ellie's
them.
imaginary friends were gods.
I know,
So
right?
I had to.
I know, right? And so I started to pray to them and talk to them and ask them to help me and said, what do you need? And here's what I need. And no one ever checked me on it. They just didn't say, well, Ellie, that's nuts or that's wrong. They just said, okay, that's just Ellie, doing her thing over there. And so we didn't have a lot of criticism for what we thought spiritually. So I always thought that these gods that I talked to were a religion because it's what I saw around me, just other god forms. And later, like maybe 14, 15, 16, I learned about witchcraft and those gods were mentioned. And I was like, oh my God, witchcraft is a religion and I'm one of them. That's how it worked for me.
Yeah, I love that answer.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Blessed be. For real.
We're starting out strong.
We are. It's a good question. What's next, Christian?
All right. And then I might have to get some soda because my throat's got a problem. So, what roles do the gods play in witchcraft, and how do witches express their connection to those gods? Is it worship, a working relationship, or something else?
Can I go first?
It's Christian can choose.
Can we go backwards and let me go first?
Ellie, you can go first as long as you know that I'm going to quickly grab a soda.
Get a soda.
Yeah, you're
I'll
fine.
keep talking. Okay. What's the question again? What's the relationship between the witch and the gods and
Is it worship?
What
Is it
role do the gods play in witchcraft?
What are the gods to you?
Do witches
All right.
express their connection to them? Is it worship? Some people say, oh, I work with the gods, I don't worship them.
Yeah.
Or is it something else?
okay.
I know this question.
I worship the gods. I work with the gods. I sleep with the gods. I eat dinner with the gods. I chat with them in good times and bad. And I always say to them, dudes, y'all, what's up? What do you want to tell me? I'm here for you. Yes, I can't imagine. Gods are so interwoven in my life and my work and my
I mean, she
witchcraft.
played with them as children.
I played with them as children. I can't imagine it without them. And for me, there's more than one. So I know I'm a little bit less monotheistic maybe than Levi and Brian. I still think there's one source. I get that, monotheism. But I know lots of gods, and I love them. They're good for different things, and they're fun in different ways. Am I answering it?
I don't know, are you?
I mean, yeah, it's your personal experience with it. Yeah.
My personal experience with it. I live with them. I talk to them all day long.
So, I mean, to clarify, you are saying you're quite theistic, though. Like they're realities.
They're real. They're
to
real.
you.
They're not in my brain.
Okay.
No, they're not
They're
my
not
psychology.
psychological
No.
tricks. Okay.
I never thought that.
Brian's a god because he talks to himself all the time.
He's talking to other gods.
What about you, Brian?
They're just named Brian.
They're just named Brian.
I don't say names. He just hears me talking, and I'm talking to myself. Well, I mean, it's a simple and a complex answer. So I'm going to go for the simple with this one. I absolutely believe in goddess consciousness. So I believe the goddess is a real being beyond our understanding. But I also think she lives in nature, the universe, and in us. So I think you can be both of those things at once. As a priest, I don't think of the gods as colleagues until they are. So I think there is a co-creative relationship going on. But at the same time, as a priest, I'm a servant of the goddess. I'm a priest of the goddess. So there's a spectrum of things going on there. So I think one has to be careful not to be too arrogant, but at the same time, we're not always humble either. We are witches. We're personally given the gifts of magic, and we, the theology behind magic, regardless of how you think about it, whether you're doing it in the high divine way of the evolution of the soul, or whether you're using an apple to make a man kiss you, you're still manipulating the forces of the universe. You personally have a role to play in that. And I personally believe that power comes from the worship. And that's why I always say that most important quality to me in a prospective initiate is sincerity, because one cannot worship if they're not sincere, because it's not worship if you're not sincere, right? You can't fake. People do fake it. Christians fake it. We call them Sunday morning Christians. But that's not real. The power comes when it's real. And anyone who's been in our circles has seen that happen and knew it was real. Because, I've heard a lot of witches say, sometimes I think the gods are just ideas until I'm in the magic circle, until I'm actually working the religion. And then at that moment, I know they're real. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's my answer.
I love that answer.
Me too.
I have a couple of things to say. This is a huge, this is something I care a lot about personally. I wrote a book called Mother, which is about goddess worship. And I'm going to say a couple of things about this. Number one, initiatory craft, Gardnerian and Alexandrian witchcraft are theistic, period. Now, if you don't believe that and you don't want to be a theist and you're a priest or priestess or a coven or whatever, that's fine. But you are deviating from the original teachings. You can see any interview.
Doesn't mean you can't use an apple to make a boy kiss.
Correct. But
but it's not the end goal.
No. If you read our elders, if you look at their interviews, Patricia Crowther has a great one where she was debating with an Anglican. You can find it on YouTube with an Anglican minister. But it was theistic from I was so living her in that interview.
Yeah,
she's in a whole mood in that. It's a great interview. But the other thing I want to say is this. I have met almost no initiates of witchcraft or people who identify as contemporary pagans or who identify as manifestors or whatever, who are literate.
Manifestors, you love that word.
Manifestor. But I've never met one who's literate in religion. And I can't be nice about this. I have a ton of people who tell me, I went to Sunday school every Sunday. I know Christianity. No, you do not. You know nothing of Christian theology. You know nothing of Islamic theology. You've never read anything other than
Levi's like, you're too dumb to be Christian. I'm sorry, the wine's kicking in.
But there's this horrible thing that pagans and witches do where they act like because they were dragged to church as a child, they think that they're educated in theology. The occultists and witches do this thing that drives me absolutely bonkers, which is to stand up and be like, I'm going to tell you something groundbreaking. God is within you, and we can become God. You mean how St. Paul said in the New Testament, do you not know it is written, ye shall be gods? This is old, guys. And every developed religion on earth that has a developed, theistic framework has the same theology that you're talking about, that God is within, that God is not a person in the sky, it's not Sky Daddy, it's the great work.
Buddhism and Hinduism also, right?
Well, yeah, not Buddhism's atheistic in many of its formations, but yes, Hinduism definitely. But this is the Christian mystics. I
don't trust Buddha.
It's not you and a lot of people.
Well, he's fat and asks people to fast.
The Buddha was not fat. That's the figure you're talking about. It's not Buddha.
He's not good in bed like the Western gods are.
You guys, I'm about to leave. But anyway, so I get really irritated. It's a personal pet peeve of mine. This idea that this is groundbreaking. To be like, well, I don't think of God as a man in the sky. God's inside of me. It's like, yeah, that's what every Christian mystic believed throughout history for 2,000 years. That's what the New Testament teaches. That's what Sufis teach. That's what Hare Krishnas believe. That's what Advaita Vedanta teaches. That's what Tantra teaches. You're not special, and you're just mad at Christianity, which that's fine. Maybe you were traumatized and that's awful. And I hate that. I hate the sort of cruelty of it all. But this is not new. And the New Age is guilty, I think, of repackaging really deep theology in really tacky, cheap ways.
Well, we are, not to sidestep, we are a Christian society in Western Europe, even with the rise of witchcraft and goddess worship and paganism. I think that's one of the reasons I like the mythology of witchcraft is because we don't deny that Christianity has impacted.
Exactly.
us. So yeah, there are a lot of sad ex-Christians out there in our communities.
But it's also just like, I mean, the idea that we're co-creators with God, it's like, I mean, yes, I agree with that, but that's not something new.
Only because it's a gift.
This is true. We all agree gods are external to us. Yes, we adapt
I
and
think they're external
identify
and internal.
psychologically,
They're
but
both.
we also all agree they're external true beings.
Yeah, what Ellie's
right?
saying is like,
Well, I believe in the consciousness. I don't think they're
consciousness.
action figures. I think that there's a consciousness beyond our understanding. And yes, it might appear as Captain America there to save you.
I mean,
but it doesn't mean that there's actually a Captain America functioning. That's my thought process on it.
yeah, I want to address something. Uncle Birch said right-hand path God is outside and left-hand path God is inside. That's not true, Uncle Birch. From where those terms come from in Hinduism, it's the Vamacharya is the left-hand path, the Vanamarga, excuse me. In Tantra, no. Right-hand Hindu teachings that invented the terms you're using believe that God is internal too. Krishna is born in the soul, according to Krishnaites. Shiva, you are Shiva, according to Shaiva Siddhanta, which is a right-hand path. So it's like, that's just an occult untruth. I'm sorry. It's just not true historically.
Well, the whole phrase left hand, right hand's pretty modern. Really.
It comes from, no, it's not. It's very ancient in Hinduism. But
I mean,
it's
in
very
our
modern
movement.
here.
Blavatsky,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, Christian, we're getting sidetracked.
I know,
So your next question. Go. Don't do that.
You should have said that thing about Ronald Hutton.
So, how does defining witchcraft as a religion, and you may have answered this a little bit, Brian, but this is really the whole conversation. This is where I was sort of shifted in my definitions. I was a voice for 30 years of witchcraft's not a religion. How does defining witchcraft as a religion empower and expand civil rights for witches?
Ooh. Do you want to just go the same order?
Yeah, we'll go back and forth. I'll stay the middle.
I think that's a very, I don't know. I have to confess it's not something that's top of mind for me often. I'm a little bit of a hermit in terms of stuff like this. I don't have a very public facing religious life outside of this. So I've never had, it's never been a problem. So I'm a little privileged in that way, I guess, where I've never had that brush up against, cruelty or authority or whatever. But
we did.
Yeah, but we did here, and I've seen it happen. I will say that I've seen it happen to people in things like custody battles or whatever, where a lawyer's tried to bring up that somebody is a witch and therefore they're a weirdo or a freak or whatever and shouldn't have children. So yeah, I guess on that I'm grateful. I'm grateful for organizations that do it. I think that's why I sometimes do think using religious terminology is important. It also, I think, puts us in a place of having more serious conversations about our practice. And entering into spaces that normalize practice to an extent where we can, diminish cruelty or diminish, Christian nationalism. So sometimes I think that all religion is stupid, I'm spiritual, not religious, is less helpful than saying I'm a witch and I'm very religious, because then the Christian right doesn't know what to do with that sometimes. It's more disruptive, I would say, on some level.
Done? Yeah. So, like Levi, I have some mixed feelings about this, but overall I'd say, because religions have in our country and in some countries, most countries in the West, religions have a certain amount of protection. So when you take witchcraft and make it secular, the corporations get to achieve because they can sell spell kits at Pottery Barn, and it's all about your intentions and what you look like on TikTok. But if it's a religion, right, that's what threatens people who want it to be some spell kits they can sell on Etsy, right? Is if it's a religion, it has to be treated with a certain amount of respect, and it gives you a certain amount of legal protection. Well, regardless, how that conversation goes, that's already in place. You can legally be protected as a witch, making it your religion, saying it's your religion. There's enough academic resources and modern religious texts out there to where that's not going to be argued. The verbiage isn't, the courts don't care about the verbiage. They don't care if you call yourself a witch, a Wiccan, or a pagan. That's not really a thing. They realize it's a fringe religion. Practitioners of voodoo and other religions can legally sacrifice certain animals in many, many states because it's got religious protection, whereas you would not be allowed to do that if it wasn't a religion. Native Americans are allowed to own eagle feathers, not because of a cultural context, but because it's considered part of their religious practice.
And consume hallucinogens.
Yes. So all of those things are true. So it does offer a certain amount of protection. I mean, personally, I think that the war of words about witchcraft will probably continue. It's irrelevant to me. It is my religion. So I don't really think too much about it in that sense, because the people who are trying to own the verbiage, it's not a religion, it's a practice of lighting candles, I guess, waving crystals around. Ooh, this is witchcraft. So I think those people aren't looking for that religious protection anyway. And in our country, that religious protection is already provided. Tarot cards and tarot readings were protected in this country because it was considered a fringe religious practice. Not because of any other reason. It was Z Budapest who actually won that battle by making it a part of her religious practice. So could that go the other way with people saying, oh, look, we've got all these people saying witchcraft isn't a religion? Sure, it could, but there's people who probably say Christianity isn't a religion. People are inherently stupid. That's my
Bill
answer.
O'Reilly famously said that and got read to filth in the media for it. He said Christianity's not a religion.
People
it's a
do.
philosophy and a
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
and he got just destroyed for it because it's a stupid statement. Bill O'Reilly.
There's people who say all kinds of things.
It's your show, Ellie.
Say it one more time, Christian. Say the sentence again. A question again, please.
How does defining witchcraft as a religion empower and expand the civil rights of witches?
This is my experience. I started being really interested in witchcraft in the middle 80s. And it was not, I don't think it was legalized as a state religion or a federal religion, and it wasn't part of the
Here it was in the 70s.
the chat book, was it?
The 70s. Raymond
I didn't-
Buckland
I
actually had something to do with the chaplain's handbook.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. It was very secret or private. It wasn't something I would
Doesn't
ever
mean
say.
people were supporting it. Yeah.
I was raised in Northwest Florida, so, a more traditional area of the U.S. And then through the 90s and 2000s, it became more on social media, television, etc. And it wasn't, I still might laugh a little bit or blow it off if someone said, oh, I see you're a palm reader or a tarot reader. And I would say, well, I was just kind of born psychic, so I do it on the side. I wouldn't have said, hey, this is part of my religion. But I moved to New Orleans 10 years ago because I wanted to fully activate my truth of who I am and what I do in my life, which is witchcraft, psychic work, metaphysical studies, worship, magic. And I feel very comfortable today, legally, in terms of my civil rights, to publicly proclaim and be on social media with what I do and what I believe. And I think it's moved forward powerfully in my lifetime. I've seen that. So I think it's a great asset. The more people who stand up for their divergent religion, their practice, whatever it is, not just witchcraft, the more humans are going to understand each other and say, hey, you're good. You're trying to help everything be great. You're okay. I think that's great. That's what I want. And I'm seeing it happen in front of me, really. Even though there's a lot of stuff on the other side that says it's all junk, I think we're still winning. I do. I'm excited about the future because I think.
What is this?
we're
Question
gonna-
number 5, Christian? Is that what we're on now?
3.
3.
Oh,
Wait,
I mean, we're
well,
going
I mean-
on 4 then. All right.
Yeah, going on 4.
I'm sort of picking, So, well, this was another big part of the conversation I was having online. How do magic and religion differ, and how do they overlap? We'll start with Ellie.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, I'm kind of the school, as Levi's mentioned. Magic to me is operative. In other words, it's actions in physics and matter. I believe I studied chaos magic. I think you can do magic without a god form, or spirit, or angel, or demon. Yes, with your own intention or your own mind power, or power from your body,
Which is a spirit.
which is a spirit. And religion is it is also an action. It's a service, a devotion to deity, a bowing down. They're 2 different verbs for me. They're 2 different verbs. I like that my religion includes magic and is built around magic, and that magic might even be defined as bringing gods down into the space that you exist and interacting with them. I think that's a magical work, and we certainly make effort to have that happen. So they're intertwined, but I feel like they're two different verbs. That's my answer so far.
There's a lot about human history we don't know, obviously, but what we do know is that magic, what we call magic now, obviously, comes from religious experience. So what we know about, what we could call the Stone Age people, what we know about early religions is that they were all magical. The priesthoods and things like that, they were all magical. Even the idea that you can pray to a god and the god might answer you, in a sense, is an act of magic, right? It's the same idea. It's a cause of, if I pray to this god, if I ask Jesus to save my marriage and he answers, they're going to think of it as a miracle, or Jesus blessing them. Mm-hmm. But in early religion, it was seen as an act of magic. So in what we would now call early shamanism, and what we know about it, because there's a lot we don't know, obviously, is people were trying to commune with the spirit world. It was never about me, and one facet I will disagree with Ellie is that I don't believe magic can ever be about me. I think magic requires the other side, whether the person's consciously thinking of that or not, whether the person's consciously thinking about it, reality, life, God exists regardless of what we think about it. The goddess exists whether we believe her or not. That's kind of the idea there. So I'm not saying that a Catholic woman doesn't ever have a work of magic working when she's counting that rosary, and she's not thinking about being magic, which sort of garners the point that it's not a mechanic.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's the way the universe works, which is a mechanic, but not necessarily in the way a human would like it to work. Most religions overcomplicate things. If you look way, way back in ancient Egypt, things were actually very simple. And then eventually they became extremely complex. But the beliefs behind those things were the same. And so I don't think that magic and religion are separate. I think the way we define them are, is being psychic religious? No. And yes. Because if being psychic is a gift that our creator, our inherent creator or nature designed within us as a facet of ourselves, it was a divine gift. And a divine gift is magic. When the seed plants and it grows, is that magic? Yes, it's magic. So I don't think that I don't think they can be separated. I think religion almost comes from magic. I think people saw things do things, they perceived things, they felt things, they were touching what we now call magic, and that was their initial connection to the divine. Sorry, go ahead.
Good job.
I think those are both interesting answers. I'll say I'm going to come at it from two places. One is, historically, magic was frequently just religion that those in authority did not like. That's where we get the word superstitious in Rome. It's superstitio. It's above and beyond. It's not acceptable. It's not
beyond the mystery.
Not good religio, right? Not good religion. But I think magic historically was one of two things. It was either religious and spiritual, so you were talking to the dead or the gods or the ancestors or the spirits or whatever, or it was rudimentary science. It was the idea that if we do a certain thing, the crops grow better, so therefore we're going to keep doing that thing. It's cause and effect.
Right.
We live in a post-Enlightenment world. And a lot of witches and pagans, I think, are just deeply anti-scientific, and that bothers me sometimes.
Me too.
For example, I wrote a book on traditional astrology. Traditional astrologers thought that the planets, not all of them, but the vast majority, people like Ptolemy and whatnot, thought that the planets actually emitted rays that had effects on the planet.
They do, Levi.
Like Mars, for example, emitted a ray that warmed or dried the Earth, whereas Jupiter was more moist.
Didn't we sunbathe in the rays of Venus one day?
Or Venus, emits a specific
every
ray.
Planet. We have sunbathed in the rays of every planet.
None of that is true. So let's just be really frank here. If you're going to...
You mean it's all just sunlight?
They mathematically present material at the same moment that mathematics are flowing through the universe.
We're
observing 2 points
All right,
in
let's
time.
let him have his mic.
I would say, no, it's a good, I don't disagree with that sort of framework. I think that's a healthy framework, but I would say some things are just not true. We live in a post-Enlightenment world. This is not the 1500s anymore.
They also thought the Earth was flat.
Science
People could fall off of it.
Science is a real thing now, and it's very, very falsifiable. If you believe that magic is something that is entirely explainable through physics, you are not correct, because we have multiple studies, and this is no longer about opinions. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. No one is entitled to imaginary facts. You cannot move objects with your mind. You cannot turn base metals into gold. You cannot turn base metals into gold. You cannot change objects with your mind. Your horoscope does not say when you're going to die with any kind of accuracy that can be predicted above random chance. Let me go ahead and be very clear here. This literal scientific language around magic that people are clinging to was disproven in the 19th frickin' century, guys. We are so far beyond this at this point that it makes us look, I mean, it doesn't make us, because I don't do it. It makes you look
But Ginny from the Thai restaurant says witchcraft is very scientific.
It makes you
scientific.
It makes you look uneducated. To still be arguing for things that a 7-year-old could disprove.
Now, one could argue, Levi, to be the devil's advocate, that science will eventually catch up with it.
Sure. I mean,
but it
hope
hasn't
all you
happened
want,
yet.
cross your fingers, it ain't going to happen. It's like, I do not think, we don't live in that world. We don't live in a world of that kind of mystery anymore. The mysteries now are about dark matter and quantum physics and whatnot. They're so unrelated to the cause and effect beliefs of magic.
Black
Now,
holes.
does that mean that I don't believe in magic? No, of course not. Of course not. Because I do think that keeping it within that religious language, I would argue, and this is I'm going to put a caveat and then I'm going to wrap up. What I'm about to say might change. What I'm about to say is just where I am now after 10 years of working in a religion that practices magic. I believe there are 2 frameworks that magic thrives in, that magic grows into healthy praxis towards what I believe we would all agree is the great work of divinization, of the elevation of the soul. A religious framework or a psychological one. Those are the only 2.
I don't believe in the psychological one.
It's not the one I use, but I think it's valid. Like, for some people.
I think it's a
Or in addition to, I think
I see what you're saying.
Yes, our friend Rosie uses a very Jungian framework.
I think it works on...
Vivian Crowley does.
Well, the British don't really use a Jungian framework. They guise it in it because they don't want to seem like they're...
Kooks. Yeah.
Kooks. Yes.
So I think yes. I think those are the only 2 frameworks that I personally have seen where people stay healthy in their magic and they grow spiritually.
They think about it.
The people
they
I know,
philosophize about it.
The people I know who are stuck, still believing that it is some sort of secret, super duper awesome science that they're so special that they have. I don't witness a lot of magical success from those people, and I witness a lot of things like paranoia, and I witness a lot of things like lack of mental health, lack of clarity, lack of education, and I don't think that's something we should celebrate. So I think, but to answer the question more literally, I think historically, what's magic and what's religion depends on time, context, and who's in power. Because, to the Romans, a lot of what Christians was doing was witchcraft. Because they did things that the Romans considered bad religion.
Early Christians were a fringe mystery cult.
Exactly.
That
They were
got
considered
persecuted. But most
superstitious.
people don't realize is that the cult of Isis was also persecuted in Rome at one point in time. So were the Christians. Like, some mystery cults were persecuted, even if it was temporarily.
Yeah.
Then they converted emperors, both of them actually. Next question, Christian. We all got to answer that, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to plow through so that you get to
be a part of the panel.
Get to share
do you find that there is a role in the craft for interfaith work with other religions in order to foster understanding and acceptance of our ways?
This will be easy for me.
You don't want to go first then?
No. Go ahead.
I knew it was going to be that. That's why I went to Brian.
No,
I was like,
that's my answer.
I knew that's what it was going to be. This is.
I think it's great to have intellectual conversations with people, but no. You're next though.
I just talked. Ellie, do you want to go first?
I don't mind not getting along with other people or not agreeing with the different interfaith things. I just feel like people can do what they want. Okay, I don't have a problem with it. I probably don't engage in the conversations either.
Just
too
don't
much.
invite me.
I don't invite Brian.
You do.
Only
Jay.
I don't know.
Second
I know. But I have a really good
I mean
friend.
you. I meant the interfaith people.
Right. I have a really good friend
You
who
better
works,
invite me, especially if there's.
works for Tannenbaum.org in New York City, which is a religious tolerance nonprofit. And so I just know from her that we're trying to get messages about that there's a lot of religions on the planet, and we need to know about them a little bit and say, hey, that exists.
I think it's great for people to talk and philosophize, but do I think the craft needs that? No, I don't.
No, I agree with you. I don't think the craft needs it. And I think that, I don't know, I'm just not a bow downer or try to humble myself to please others kind of a spiritual practitioner.
I believe religion is better when it's private.
Private.
Your turn.
Me too.
Don't forget the second half of the question.
What
What's
was
the second half of the question?
Well, that this understanding and acceptance. Some people don't accept us.
Well, I think you should accept everyone. So that part is fine.
And I
don't feel like I need to rub elbows with the Buddhists and the Christians to be a viable priest.
So to clarify, both of you are kind of arguing you would prefer to ground the conversation of our rights in things like civil rights and
Correct.
not interfaith work.
Not interfaith work.
Okay. Yes.
No, unless it was necessary.
No, I think that's a valid answer.
But I wouldn't be rude about
wondering,
it.
is it necessary? Does it help them to understand us if every once in a while we got a coffee with them?
Yeah.
I mean, yes. I think to me, though, how the craft operates is it's up to individual priests and priestesses to do that in their local communities and to the people that know them. I don't think it's something, because we aren't organized, we don't have a central authority, there's not really any way to govern that question. So, and nor do I think initiatory coven should start doing it. So,
yeah, on an individual level, I think, yeah.
I think individual people can do that, but I don't think covens should be striking out on their own and being like, I'm going to represent the craft in an interfaith movement.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
I think my craft has been enriched by deep conversation and study of other people's faith traditions. But the best conversations I've ever had have been where we're both pretty recalcitrant.
And I mean the actual craft. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, of course. I mean, my best conversations have always been grounded in this mutual respect of understanding that we don't agree. I think David Bentley Hart, who's a Christian theologian I've mentioned before on this show that I really like, he has a video you can find on YouTube called I'm a Syncretist, Not a Perennialist, right? Which is this idea that, like, I love finding commonalities with other faiths. I love finding that. But we're not all doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And saying that we're all really doing the same thing cheapens our spiritual experiences. It cheapens our personal work.
We are not.
We're just not.
We are not.
When Levi came to New Orleans, I'm not going to name the name of it. Well, not when he came to New Orleans. When he was first coming to the New Orleans Coven, he went to a ritual where they had arbor mist on the altar and bubble wands for the invocations.
You bring this up so many times.
I'm just telling you, we are not all doing the same thing.
No, and I think
we have nothing in common except verbiage.
It also leads, actually, Christian, I would
which
argue,
isn't even the same definitions.
If you don't have a lot of mutual respect for difference in interfaith work, it can actually make the situation worse. So, like, I've seen spiritual New Agers who believe in God say things to Buddhists like, you and I are the same. Even though your entire philosophy says there's nothing unchanging in the heavens, deep down you really believe the same thing I do. I think that's disrespectful on some level. People know what they believe, and they're allowed to disagree with you. And so good interfaith work, I think, should begin with difference. We don't all three
believe in the exact same nuances of the same things.
You're right.
And it's okay, but we have a commonality of belief that brings us together.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue with one thing. I would agree with you on, or not agree with you. I would lean into the question one way, which is it is markedly different from when I was young to now about the public acceptance of witchcraft in small town America.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying.
For all of
and I'm young. And I'm relatively young.
Christians.
And I didn't necessarily imply that interfaith was nice either.
No, but I do think it has helped.
I was on the phone with that preacher that went against us on Halloween, and I wasn't very nice, but it was still interfaith.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you ask us one more question, Christian, and we'll open it up because your questions have been pretty in depth, and I can tell you're biting at the bit. So we'll open you up. So ask us one more question, and we'll see if we get any calls. If we don't, you can ask more questions. But let's ask one more question before we open up to callers and put you on the panel because I can tell he's losing his patience.
This is an interesting one. What do you see as the most core religious belief of witchcraft?
Ooh, yes.
These two.
The goddess.
That was the one I wasn't sure. You'd be like, oh, is oath breaking? Oh, like
No, the goddess. Because here's the reason I say that is there are a million other religions in the world that have gods or a god. And there are many, many, many practices that have magic. But the craft, initiatory Alexandrian Gardnerian craft from the 1950s or earlier, the first priesthood in Western civilization to arise that worships a goddess as a priesthood. And to date, we're really still the only one in Western civilization. Obviously, we've got Hindus and other practices like that have older continuities than ours. But we were the first who said, we're worshipping Diana again. We're worshipping Herodias. We're bringing back the old gods, and we worship a goddess. We worship a goddess, And so I think that is the most unique thing about modern craft. And yes, we've got goddess worshippers and polytheists who worship many goddesses nowadays. But what separates us from the polytheists is the polytheists worship many goddesses who are usually in pantheons that are male dominated. We worship the goddess. There is no god before her.
Oh, Ellie, what would you say?
Say the question again, Christian, please.
Okay. What do you see as the most core, single, obviously, religious belief of witchcraft?
The gods are real. The goddess is real.
And I knew them as a child.
No, I don't know another answer. I don't know.
That's a good
answer.
answer. I think it's a good
I don't know
answer.
another answer. I think that's really right.
The gods.
The core thing would be for me would be the gods. And
Yes,
real.
and don't get me wrong, we have our own god and we're quite fond of him. But, lots of
as
people
a straight
worship
woman,
gods.
I just have to confess, as a straight woman, I kind of like the god of the witches.
Straight.
He's the one that came first to me. A lot of people say the goddess comes first. That wasn't true for me. The god came first.
We're all cats in the dark.
La nuit et les chats sont gris.
What did he just say about me?
At night, all cats are gray. It's a French idiom. Tous les chats sont gris. All cats are gray in the night. The most central belief of witchcraft, of religious witchcraft.
I just said witchcraft.
Oh, of witchcraft. Okay.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, for us, yeah.
Who cares what it is to the people of Walmart?
Who cares what it is to the people of Walmart?
Or the grass hugger dancers. The grass dancers.
I might also say
we
that
don't care what the grass
that
dancers.
magic
This
is
show
still
isn't
real.
grass dancers.
Grass dancers coming
What about
to
square dancers?
Cirque du Soleil. Grass
About what?
dancers. Danseuses de l'herbe. Like if you
Square
will.
dancers, that's
Square dancers? I don't know.
No, those are Christians, honey. Okay.
Oh, I think witches could do a square dance.
This is actually an interesting question because I would have said the goddess. I mean,
I
everybody
know.
knows
We
that.
all kind of would.
We all kind of would, or the god, right?
I have a different answer.
Divinity. But I think I'm going to say,
You're not on yet.
I'm going to say the core belief of witchcraft is that if you go out into the dark and scream loud enough and long enough, and with all your heart, something will answer you.
It'll come.
Oh my God.
And it will transform you.
Devil.
Yeah.
Right?
If you build
go out
it, he
into
will.
the
I've literally
So-
thought the devil
so-
was going to be the topic of the show.
But that might be the exposure of your true self, Levi,
exactly.
to really show up with your
Let's
soul.
get all psychological about it, shall we?
I think also
Somebody take away the glasses and the wine. Like it's-
I think another thing.
I'm
I
just
think
going to
another
turn
thing
into this sort of British rock star.
is
kind of a
magic. I
thing.
think one of the center ideas is magic, though, for me.
I think so too, Ellie.
All
I
right,
think so too.
that was Christian's last official question.
Okay, we have a call.
So let's take
No
the
way,
call
we
first.
have a call.
So Christian, you get to answer the questions on the calls now.
I'm
Share
a little
with everyone else.
interested. Let's see.
Do we have a number? You're following the rules, right?
Yes. Hi, is this Lynn?
Hello. Bright blessings. It's Lynn Rose. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you,
can.
Klein.
Bright
How are you?
blessings.
Good. How are you doing today?
Lovely. What's your question, Lynn Rose?
My question today is, with everything going on in the world currently, what do you believe is the best tool to save us all?
Ooh, big question. Okay.
The best tool to save us all?
Yep.
Yes.
A rocket ship to take us to another planet.
Brian's a little doomery about it. Okay.
No, I mean,
I was going to say nukes.
I'll just quick say that I think as far as from a witchcraft perspective, I think bringing goddess consciousness into the world has the potential, even if it's not too late, to change hearts and minds and the way that we interact with each other in the natural world.
Yeah, I love that. I think nature is a good answer with a tool we need.
Like ecology, you mean?
Ecology, diving back into who we are on the planet, fitting in with
I answered the phone
other
question.
things.
You do it with us. We do it together. You don't get to take over. You just become a part of the club.
And I think another great tool is education about
It's like,
all
I thought
subjects.
it was my show now.
I think that's true, Ellie. I
Education about history, language, culture, art history. That gives perspective and knowledge of the long scope of what humans have been doing on the planet, and hopefully help us do a little better in the future.
Christian, what would you say? What's the best tool to help us save the world?
I'm going to sound like Wonder Woman.
Oh, I wish.
Love.
Love?
Love is the answer.
Well, that's a good answer, really.
It's the only answer.
It's not really a Christian Day answer, but it's a good answer.
It's the valid answer.
Well, now I have a song in my head.
Da, 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 da,
How about you, Levi?
da, da,
The
da,
best
da,
tool,
da.
Lynn-Rose, to save the world. Education.
Yay!
I work in education. I always have. It's been my professional life for a long time.
Because it's got us so far.
Yeah, it's really, I think a lot of the great evils of the world are because of ignorance. And I think...
Where people who are too smart know how to make nuclear bombs.
If you have an
It'd be better off if we were still worshipping out of caves.
If you have an opportunity in your community to aid education in some way, especially for those who have been disenfranchised from it, I think you'd be surprised by how much of an impact it would have.
So here's my last joke of the evening.
Exactly.
Levi is literally Satan in the garden being like, you just need an
Yeah, but
education.
are you leaving out the fact that, like, it depends on what kind of education? I mean, what if your
right.
elementary schools are saying, shoot Jewish people? Or
That's
know what
not
I mean?
education, that's indoctrination. So like education is teaching you
Get
reasoning
educated,
skills.
Christian.
Right. So it's like reasoning skills are necessary for good
I
education.
just have to announce I'm now the Lord of Misrule.
Just now, we're realizing this. I think that's just been life. But thank you, Lynn-Rose. That was an intense question to begin with, but it was a good one.
Very good question. And to the point.
Yeah, that was really powerful. I really liked all of your answers. Each one was very unique. I appreciated the humor initially because it is a big question. And should I ask another, or is one enough?
You can ask
You
another
can ask
one.
another if you want, sure.
We usually say two to each.
Yeah, 2 is fine.
What do you think is the best way to tune into your inner oracle?
We have to let Ellie start on this one.
Well, a lot of people would answer meditation, so mental control, so that you've kind of got control of your thinking and breathing. You can relax and not let your mind go away from you, but keep it centered on a focus of an idea like love or gold or flame, something that's real simple and universal. Your own oracle. Well, what I used to do is like a lot of really hot yoga and sweat, and then sit down on the ground and just meditate and ask to see the things I needed to see for myself, and then I could broaden that out to see things for other people. But I like to do exercise first before deeper psychic work.
Well, when it comes to a phrase like your inner oracle, it's not a verbiage I would use, but I get your meaning.
Right.
Whether we call it you being psychic or utilizing the sight or whatever. I think that there's a good book called Silver Mind Control Method, which I'd recommend anyone to read if you want to develop your mental skills as a human being. And
Scientific.
they're mental skills, which is scientific. Mental skills are, definitely something that can help you enhance your own intuition and your own, awareness of yourself.
Physiological too, though.
I'm answering right now. When you are doing work, do you read the tarot at all?
I absolutely do, as much as I can.
Yes. That's my favorite tool, not the only one I utilize, but I quite like it. But I find when doing your own tarot readings, it's easier to read on others than it is on yourself with the tarot from my perspective. So what I like to do is actually, because I think that they're great doorways to consciousness, is I will do a spread for myself and leave it for days until the answer comes, because the answer will come in a thought or a dream or a manifestation. It won't come from staring at the cards. So you're just opening the door to yourself and whatever tool you use. But when it comes to the self, I do believe you have to give it breath. You can't just do it like that because you're fighting yourself. You know, you do the tarot reading, it tells you he doesn't love you, and you do it again.
Right, but you have to let go into it. That's what you're saying.
You have to let go
Breathe
of the
into
process.
it. You know, breathe into it.
But, you know, not verbiage I use, but, you know, I prefer to find very psychic witches and ask them questions without ever telling them it's a reading.
That's right.
He does do that a lot. Christian, how do you get in touch with your inner oracle?
Scientifically. Well, I mean, I learned variations of visionary states and alpha level from Laurie Cabot, who, of course, studied the Silver Method. She wrote the book Power of the Witch. And why am I echoing? So for me, it's all about learning how to relax the mind to where you're generating an increase of alpha waves. I actually have a little machine that shows you how it scientifically, but actually measures and says you are generating more alpha waves than you are the other waves.
The brain is real. The brain is real. It exists.
Right. So it's not just mental, it's also physiological.
Yes, it is.
And you can actually measure.
But the brain isn't witchcraft. The brain itself is not witchcraft.
No, but it absolutely connects to it. Magic is definitely part of the mind, body, brain connection.
Levi's completely wrong, really.
So, it's relaxation and connectivity, and you don't always have the opportunity to have tools. And so to learn how to do that
It's
with
like
your
magic
mind,
without tools.
to learn how to visualize and to understand that the energy you're pulling into your mind's eye is energy that's somewhere in the world. You're not just imagining an apple or a person or those things that you're seeing. You are bringing in the psychic energy packet of that thing in the world. And once you learn how to manipulate that energy and perceive it, you can then perceive changes in the world around you, including future events.
Lynn, I would say I don't particularly. I think one of the best ways to hone it, I don't know about getting in touch with. I think sometimes in our contemporary world where it's no longer considered normal, where it's not, you don't have a shaman in the village, you don't have an oracle in the, I think sometimes it does take pretty radical ecstatic experiences, whether that's religious ecstasy or exerting the body or other forms of mysticism. I think sometimes to have visionary states takes a lot of work in the modern context that it might not have historically. But I would say one of the best things you can do for any kind of quote unquote intuitive work or psychic work is to know when to use it and to know when not to. I think an over addiction to it, to constantly going back to the voice in your own head about every single decision, starts to erode any real meaning behind it pretty quickly. So I don't think it's the most useful tool for most decisions, to be honest.
I call it overreading.
Yeah, people overread a lot.
It's a mess, isn't it?
It is. It's just messy.
Does
and
he love me?
It
Does he love me now?
Does he love me yesterday? Does he love me tomorrow?
Why doesn't he love me? What's
Is he
his
still
problem?
with his
What's the
wife?
block?
Does he love his wife?
Is someone controlling him?
So I think Lynn, that would be one of my only thing to add would be, don't put too much into it where you can no longer make decisions based on things like reason or good faith or
That's why I say give it a breath.
I agree with what Brian said. I think that's a really good amount of advice for any kind of divinatory tool, even not just tarot though. Like let it go. You got to let it go at some point.
Let it work itself out.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated everything that you guys said, and I definitely feel complete, and I'll leave it at those two questions. But thank you so much.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn Rose.
What a lovely call. So I'm going to look through the comments, but if you all have a question for each other that you want to ask,
well, Christian still has more questions if he wants to throw them out there, but we might have questions in the comments because there are quite a lot there.
Yeah, I'm going to scroll through, but if you want to ask while I'm looking, Christian,
ask us another question, and you can join in on the answer for these ones, Christian.
What do you think of the phrases that you often see constantly on social media these days? Witchcraft is a practice, Wicca is a religion, and I'm a witch, not Wiccan.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep it simple because you can watch like half of the episodes of Covendom and find me addressing this. Levi literally says it's the hill I'm going to die on.
It is.
So Levi is actually in this panel, including Christian. Levi would be the language expert. And Levi actually helped me with this early on in my research to some degree because I wasn't quite familiar with gendered and non-gendered languages. And Levi was like, this, and also pointing out to me that Old English is Germanic but not German. Those two things Levi taught me. But the reality of the situation... Everyone take a drink.
It's a drinking game here when Brian says that.
You told me someone did make a drinking game.
They did.
Yes, apparently whenever I'd say that on Covendom, people would take a drink. Is that this is the same language. So you've got, and it's obviously more complicated than that, but to make it base, you've got somewhere at some time in merry old, what we call merry old England, you got a group of people and a culture and a language group that we would identify now as Old English, which is a combination of Frisian, probably Celtic, Germanic, and all the other Roman things that blended to make merry old England. Heavy Germanic influences, but its own language group formed. And in that language group, the word, what we call Wicca, which was probably pronounced something like Witcher, probably more like Vicha, or something very strange like that. It was probably somewhere between a W and a V. There is the old Norse word vitka, which means to know. Mm-hmm. So there are older words that are corresponding to this, but all of a sudden we've got what modern people are calling Wicca, right? And that's Old English. Anglo-Saxon and Old English is the same thing. It's the same language group. Then you get the Middle English, and Levi could give you the detailed nuances, none of which we want to hear here because it would probably be very long.
It's very boring.
But the Old English was a gendered language. So you had your male and your female, Wicca, Wicca, which I sort of love to tell people. It's like Witcha and Witchy, like witchy woman. The female was like witchy woman. Now that's not exactly how they pronounced it, but through the modern tongue, it's more accurate than Wicca or Wicca. So in Old English, two C's made the ch sound, not a hard K. In German, they made a hard K, not in Old English. So in Middle English is where we get the birth of the word witch, right? Where it was a gendered language. And then we have Modern English, witch. But these are all the same words in the same language group on the same little island country. They had the same meaning to these people, variations, obviously, cultural identity. But from the earliest time of Old English, it was still a Christian country, and if it has an older pre-Christian nuance to it, we just don't really have a strong record of it. So a witch is a witch is a witch, historian Valente said. So Wicca, even though it's been recreated and rebranded as a modern word, was still a word that was coming out of witch. So that it's even in that scenario, it still means witch. Like Wicca was presented to the modern populace primarily through Alexander's and the Farrar's works early on as an older alternative word for witch. It was the old, and all of the initial books said this is the Old English word for witch. And most of them didn't tell you how to pronounce it. Do I think Gardner and Alex knew how to pronounce it? No, I think they probably said Wicca, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you pronounce it, how you say it. The reality of the situation is Wicca means witch. They're the same word. So this very modern definition, because this started peaking up almost in the 2000s. I was alive and practicing witchcraft when Wicca wasn't a very popular word. I saw the rise of the word Wicca, because it started happening after AOL, quite frankly. YouTube was a huge component to it, and Scott Cunningham's book was the major component to it. That was the one that really lifted it off. And it makes sense to me now, because I remember when I saw his book, Wicca, A Guide to the Solitary Practitioner, I'd already been working into witchcraft. I'd read Raymond Buckland's complete book of Witchcraft, which mentions Wicca in there, but it's like a brief little, side note. I didn't quite know what it was. And I remember asking the woman who would become my first teacher, what is this book? And she said, the beginning of the end. Because it was a nuance. They were trying to repackage witchcraft as a safe religion. And with the advent of, and that's what we used it for. We used the word Wicca to tell our aunt who was paranoid, I practice Wicca. Because she didn't know what it meant. It was a safe way to shield people from the evil word witch. But as Gardner and Buckland and others have said, well, eventually they're going to figure out it just means witchcraft. So why not educate them to what witches really do? There's no historical proof of a religion named Wicca. There's no historical proof of a religion named witchcraft. But witchcraft was presented to the modern world as the religion, not Wicca. That didn't start coming out as an idea until the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and really manifested in the 2000s. And then I started seeing these YouTube videos that would say, Wicca's a religion, witchcraft's a practice. A practice of what? Anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Ellie, what would you add?
Well, one of my first witchcraft books, Mastering Witchcraft by Paul Husson, said witchcraft, not Wicca. I thought I was exposed to Wicca in the U.S. and I didn't like the people who practiced it. I didn't jive with them. They weren't my style. And then,
you mean the Scott Cunningham people?
Yeah,
to clarify.
Yes, or pagan, and I don't mean that negatively. I've said some negative things I shouldn't. I've said all they do is shop and eat. And
Grass
I regret
dancers.
That. Grass dancers. But I don't. It was just my experience in the South, and in a small way of.
It's not just your experience.
Being magical as a child, et cetera, and then growing into this world of Wicca, and I was just like, yuck, this is not my style, these are not my people. And then in 2000 I started going to England and Scotland extensively and having entree with people that call themselves witches, not Wiccans. And I was like, these are my kind of folk, herbalists, rural, folkloric, multi-charmed, religious witches, and I didn't find them in common with American counterparts. I never used the word Wicca for myself, rarely. Someone might ask me on occasion, Ellie, aren't you Wiccan or practice Wicca? And I would maybe say yes to avoid a deeper conversation, which wouldn't have mattered to them. That would have still been in the South, and through 2000. Just
that
not,
was a Levi answer.
to not raise waves, to just get through it. But I have such a diverse, magical studies and training in different places that
all of these words mean different things to different people.
I always
now,
said witchcraft.
Regardless of the actual history.
I always said witchcraft.
I am from Massachusetts, so we drop the R off of the ends of words. And so when I hear Wicca, I think of cheap patio furniture.
Enough Wicca.
Worker.
Wicca.
Let's go to the
Wicca.
Kerr so we can go to the Coven and practice the Wicker.
No, I parked my car in Harvard Yard and practice Wicca.
Non-rhotic pronunciation.
My Wicca chair.
Christian, I have to ask you this question, and Levi still needs to go, but I'm going to throw Christian in because, by all intents and purposes, we all practice initiatory Wicca, even though that's not the verbiage that we choose to use in the Alexandrian tradition, because maybe it's because we actually come from people who are close to the source.
I will never use that word.
But it exists, it comes from us. Like, it comes from us, even though it's mispronounced.
Okay.
And I'm all about teaching people, like, okay, this is in our liturgy, but it's mispronounced, and I see no reason to continue to do that. I can't say that. I was also going to say something I can't say.
I know.
But in any case, Christian, how do you feel now that you're a practicing Wiccan? Do you... what's your thought process on this question from your vantage point now? Because I think one of the things we run into is that some American Gardnerians in particular, some British, but mostly American Gardnerians, they gave up on the word witch. They just went like, everyone's using it. It means all these things to different people. Let's own Wicca. And they
don't own that either.
Well, that's my whole point. They were too late to the game. Scott Cunningham owned it before they did. So that's the problem, is neither one of these words.
Asking me the question or trying to answer it?
Well, I'm trying to ask you the question, but as usual, you keep interrupting me. So in this particular sense of knowing that these words both are used in ways you wouldn't use them, you're still now faced with the reality of the fact that you are initiated as an initiated witch, and that the term Wicca derives from our traditions. So how do you navigate this question from that vantage point as an initiate?
Well, I think you touched on it earlier as far as the Anglo-Saxon not, being a gendered language. Laurie Cabot had always said to me, the old word for witch is witch. It's not Wicca.
Well, she's wrong.
But
she's right
so
and
it's
she's
not
wrong.
Wicca, it's witch.
She's right and she's wrong.
The old word for witch is witch. And, well, in the sense of what you talked about earlier, she's right.
She's right because it would have been, which makes sense. And Levi could say, as a language person, the fact that it's always sounded similar.
If you take, if you take the gender variations off of huicha and wiche, you're left with witch.
You are correct. Which is what happened in Middle English.
It's pronounced witch or witch.
Look at you
the point
being a teacher.
Huh? Am I wrong?
No, you're correct.
So,
that's literally what happened. Middle English is when it became non-gendered.
With that in mind, I think it's perfectly safe to interpret our own liturgy through those lenses. And it also illustrates that, there is a certain amount of interpretation. Even in a written liturgy, you're going to see it, and people will come to it with different perspectives. Hopefully there's a core, but, we are going to look at it differently. I was one of the most visible voices for decades of witchcraft is not, TV and all, witchcraft is not a religion. And, I think for me, I think the most important reason to use the word religion, because I still don't like the word religion, if I'm being honest.
Oh, you can feel free to embrace our ancestors and say you belong to the witch cult.
Not because there's three different definitions. You have your dictionary definition. You have your colloquial definitions. The common understanding of the word religion does not necessarily match what it says in the dictionary. And then the third one, which is really what won me over to using the word, even if it somewhat makes me uncomfortable, because of not the dictionary, but the colloquial understanding of the word religion, sort of gives this idea of everybody sitting in church and following the priest. It is a certain kind of supplication that doesn't really gel with me. But the legalistic definition of religion, in the United States, you are automatically afforded a greater series of rights civilly simply by using the word religion. I asked a woman on my Facebook wall, I said, if you were in court and they were about to take your kids away and your lawyer said, but if you just say witchcraft is your religion, you can keep your kids, she couldn't answer the question. She didn't quite say she would die on the hill, but she couldn't answer. She's like, well, I don't know. It's so complicated. And I'm like, well, if all I got to do is say, witchcraft is my religion, oh, good, you get to keep, your kids, I'd be like, praise Jesus, hallelujah, it's my religion. I think that the legalistic definition does sort of create a scenario by which linguistically you're weaving yourself into the language of the culture you live in order to live your best life and be able to get through it. And so sometimes I do think we conform to certain language and what have you.
Yeah, you have to.
In order to get those rights. Now, as an initiate, and I realize that the narrative is generally, unlearn everything you've learned before. And, and I respect that to a point, but I do think a lot of what I did before.
You're totally misreading that. That is the wisdom of Yoda. you must unlearn all you have learned. I think it probably comes from older sources, but the reality of it is that that's just something that if somebody already knows something so staunchly that they can't...
that I would agree with. But I mean...
So in other words, you're learning.
There were, the Hermetic practices, the Cabot training, all of that sort of prepared me, and there were confirmations of things that came from being an initiate that made me realize I was really on that path all along in that direction. I mean, I wasn't doing those things.
You just had to get past the hubris of people. Now, I want to give Levi a chance to answer the question as well. What were your thoughts on the word Wicca?
I don't particularly like it. It's not something I use as a moniker, really. But I'm going to say something that's going to be super controversial, maybe.
I think I've heard it before.
The deeper I go into initiation, I'm not as addicted to the word witch either. I use the word priest or initiate more than I do witch.
That's actually true in the UK.
Yeah.
From the people I know. So my teacher, Val, was the one who she said, Brian, nowadays a lot of us, we don't, in public, we don't, privately they use the word witch, but in public it was really more just initiate.
Yeah.
Or priest or priestess, because initiate and priest and priestess were something people couldn't get in upset about. But now they can. So, I've had people come at me who are solitary people who are like, well, I'm initiated. Well, that's not what we mean. Well, I'm self-initiated. You don't think I'm valid? I was like, valid is what? I don't know. It's really all just verbiage and fighting over verbiage and about, what is it about? It's about validation and approval, which to a certain extent initiation requires, but I don't think it's really, validation isn't really the moniker of a witch, is it?
No.
So we really fight this paradox of those things, really, being the rebellious individuals who wield magic and worship a forgotten rebellious
I love
goddess.
that. I was just thinking that we're witches in multiple lifetimes. And so in some lifetimes we're priests or priestesses. Maybe only recently we might have been called witches in the Middle Ages. Today, maybe a bit Wiccan.
Ellie used to be a 200-pound old lady in a village. Her name was Hobbs. And the legend about her was that she was part hobgoblin.
But I knew everything. I knew everything.
She only had 2 or 3 teeth. But people were deathly afraid of her. She could heal every malady.
I was going to say I only had 3 toes.
Some people said she was the Kaliak.
I only had 3 toes.
She might be the source of all the legends.
Are we on LSD? What's happening?
No, but I'm just going to say.
I'm being a bard.
Witches come through. Witches come through many lifetimes, and I think it's very old. I have other ideas about that.
This is really good wine, Levi. It's a chateau.
So through reincarnation, we might call ourselves different things.
Kind of like its own form of wealthy LSD
in society.
Do we have any more questions witches in the comments? Mm-hmm. If you are brave enough to call,
we have a caller.
Oh, good. We love callers. Who's our caller?
I have more questions.
Well, callers. It's the caller hour now, so that's only if that happens.
Hi, you're on Covendom. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Hi, who is this?
Who goes there?
Who is this?
My name is Jalen Tronjo. I am from Alberta, Canada.
Oh, very nice to speak to you. What's your question?
So I am of what we call up here in Canada, the Indigenous people. I'm what we describe as First Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Since Indigenous people encompasses 3 original peoples of Canada within our history.
Yep.
So just to give a little bit of background, not too long, is I am, so I actually started trying to regain my culture and my heritage, reclaiming who I am as an Indigenous person through witchcraft. Trying to...
What was your name? Your first name?
Jalen?
Jalen? Do I have that right? I'm just making sure.
Yeah. So, with regards to understanding... So I'm trying to think back here. My apologies. This is just how my brain works as a neurodivergent. So trying to find my place because I am the child of 4 residential school survivors.
Okay.
Well, Jalen,
So,
I've actually got a bit of a thing I could connect with you on here, sort of. First of all, I can hear it in your voice. And the only reason I think I can hear it in your voice is because of people I grew up around. So when I was very young, up into my early teens, Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble, our other family was Native American in America. But we were they were from the Colville Coeur d'Alene tribes, which is very close to Canada, but I don't know where in Canada you're from. I grew up with people who were, what do you call it? You get the Indian money.
Indigenous.
They were seen as legal Native Americans. And they knew their language as well as could be known. They would practice the religion. And so I grew up around that. And interesting enough, as I became a young adult, we have stayed friends. So they got to see my introduction into witchcraft. And I was best friends with a young woman, and her mother she wouldn't call herself a medicine woman. She studied under medicine people, but she was a medicine woman, or is a medicine woman. And they very much were into their own culture, and we could find commonalities in our conversation. So regardless of whatever your introduction is, I mean, I can't tell you what you should pursue, but I will tell you in witchcraft, our religion of witchcraft, we don't actually believe it's not an ethnic faith for us, although it is from England, which means it has lots of different things, Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, Viking, Roman, and probably things we don't even know about, the Picts, which are probably just pre-Celtic people. All these different tribes and things that lived at that time. We believe in reincarnation, so we believe people could have been anything and will be anything. So someone could have been, a druid or a Vedic from the Hindu cultures and be a witch now. So we don't have that approach, but I absolutely think there are commonalities between the two. Now, where you'll find an obstacle in finding that nowadays is that there's an apprehension with initiatory witchcraft to embrace indigenous cultures from our own vantage. Because if I start talking about Native American stuff, what do I look like?
Appropriated.
I did.
Yes, in our culture
I
now,
understand that.
as much as I might know about root digging and all that sort of thing, I don't look Native American. I'm not Native American. I think I might have one in my history, maybe a couple. So the sort of shy away from it. But from your vantage point, witchcraft wouldn't shy away from you. So I think personally, I do think the two weave together quite nicely, actually. I think the witchcraft of America, the witchcraft of America that's older than the word witchcraft absolutely resides in the medicine people of the indigenous medicine people of this continent.
Which I descend from. That's part of my lineage.
Nice.
But the thing with up here, just to kind of give you an understanding, is we don't use religion up here in Canada. We use spirituality because it encompasses our entire existence.
That's a common phrase. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to let you know, and it's not to
I'm gonna stop you, Jalen. There are quite a few hardcore Catholics in Montreal that would disagree with you. So
I think she means from her.
Yeah, maybe in the indigenous population, sure.
I've never heard of. My friends I grew up with did refer to it as their people's religion, but that was in a private contextual context, and that actually was a long time ago when I was young. So nowadays spirituality is more popular, but quite frankly, what they were practicing was just as much a valid religion. Legally it is a religion. Legally it is protected as a religion. The United States government or the Canadian government does not actually protect spirituality. They protect religions or religious practices.
Actually, they do up here.
But they might use that verbiage. That's possible.
Yeah. So it's a very big difference between how, historically speaking, within how America in the U.S. and how Canada dealt with what we call the Indian problem in Canada's history. So.
Yeah, First Nations history in Canada is unique.
Yeah, no, very different, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for calling in. I hope our answers helped your questions.
They did, because my wife is non-Indigenous and does practice.
That's good to
So
see the
with her
connection.
and I, it's kind of an interesting mix.
My friends taught me
Thank you again
some
so
of
much
their
before I drop the
practices
call.
without
Thank you so
ever
much, Jayla.
worrying about the fact that I was white as Casper. All right.
I would, I think something that might be a good place, since Christian, your questions, I think, are leading to something that I've seen a lot in the conversation that I think would be a very good question for this show's topic. What do you feel about that phraseology that she used that was very important?
Spirituality versus
religion.
religion.
The idea of like, this is not, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
Well,
this is a spirituality, not a religion.
The word spirituality sort of, are you asking him directly or all of us?
I thought we could all answer.
Well, I was going to go first just because I'll lose my mind. I'll make it as brief as I possibly can. So I'm not a fan of spirituality nowadays as a term, because I choose not to secede the word religion, and that's from my vantage point as a witch. Spirituality is a term that was created as an alternative to religious practices that were seen as Abrahamic, Orthodox, all that sort of thing. But quite frankly, the word religion, like to the Native Americans, the word religion and spirituality didn't exist. My friends in English would call it medicine. They were medicine people, or they were practicing medicine, but they knew what religion and spirituality meant. There's a thing on YouTube, was it called Spiritual Guy or something like that? My Spiritual Guy or Spiritual Boyfriend. It just has a very strong New Age context to me now, and it relates to Crystal's white men with dream catchers calling themselves Papa Moon Bear, and a lot of other things that I just don't resonate with.
Moon Bear.
Spirituality now to me says, this feels good, it feels right. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's not a bad word. There's nothing wrong with the word spirituality. It's just, I don't favor it, because using that to me secedes religion, but I understand why people do. But it wasn't a verbiage of craft, and it certainly wasn't a verbiage of British craft. So it just doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. I've never heard, outside of TikTok and those sorts of things, people referring to witchcraft as spirituality, not in any sort of weird, real occult sense.
Oh, I see that constantly. That's the number one way it's referred.
Yeah, in those things, but not like in a occult sense. Like you didn't see that with Paul Hewson or any of those people saying witchcraft is a spirituality. Even Scott Cunningham, I don't think he called it a spirituality.
I don't think so either.
That's a very new, Levi's much younger than the rest of us. So,
Old soul.
The rest of them, he's a few years younger than me. But, it's become a popular thing. Spirituality is the opposite of religion. That's
what people say.
The paradox that's going on there.
Ellie, what would you say?
In my experience with people that I work with, which is, thousands of people a year as a reader and spiritual teacher and guide for others, I hear the word spirituality as opposed to religion a lot when I find I'm talking to someone who doesn't study religion at all and doesn't know much about religion. They just rejected their family religion of usually more Orthodox Christianity, and they call themselves spiritual because they know there's something going on in the world of spirit, but they don't want to define it or study it too severely or anything else. So I don't push it as a reader and a helper. I use their words once they identify themselves as, sometimes, I read for Catholics, I read for Buddhists, I read for Protestants, God forbid,
It's
Methodists.
a phrase here. I remember a woman, when we first moved here, there was a woman, an African-American woman in the park. Her way of relating to me, and this was not a New Age guru person, but it's just in our culture now. She said, my aunt is spiritual like you are.
Right.
Meaning you believe in something, but you're not conventional.
Yeah.
Right. And I hear that a lot too. And I just go with it with my clients.
Spiritualist churches. Do you think that's where it comes from, kind of?
No, it's older than that. It comes from a lot of things, but it's older than
Well,
that.
I think the modern use.
Educate us,
is-
Levi. Tell us how it's
But
really.
don't you think the modern use is real nebulous? Like, I believe in something, but I don't know
Well, he
what,
hates it too,
and
but he does know some
You're not a
stuff about
complete
it.
materialist, a spiritual.
Bring something to the table.
I agree with what Rodriguez Mystic said in the
I
comments.
believe in Rodriguez too.
Which is like, it's a very useful
I just like the
term
name Rodriguez.
for people who are spiritual in a sense. They have beliefs, but they don't belong to a particular organization. So it gives them a word to describe an experience that is oftentimes othering, in a society that's
My religion's
particularly
witchcraft.
religious. Right.
Well, I get you.
Christian, what do you think?
I think Brian said one part I agree with, which is I don't want to cede the word religion. I also don't want to cede the word witch. I think that, even though I also use warlock, but I don't want to cede any of these words that really empower us to groups trying to define them as something other than we are. And it doesn't mean they can't use them. So if the Stang Gang, as I call them, Witchcraft.
They're dead. They're all dead.
I'm just saying, these people running around with stings and killing frogs, if they want to call it witchcraft, it doesn't affect me, because when I'm out there with the microphone and the camera, I'm going to say what I think it is. So I don't worry about them. But I'm also not going to give the word over. And in the same, regard, I think spirituality creates the same problem that
It's a
saying
fat word.
witchcraft is.
It's a fat word.
Is this my chance to answer the question?
Yes. Trying to trigger Levi.
I think that to use spirituality is fine in the sense that Levi speaks of. If what you're believing isn't really very definitive, it's not probably going to get you in trouble with the courts anyway. So if you just want to say, I'm a spiritual person, but if those spiritual practices become cohesive enough that they make you a target, well, then the word spirituality is not going to get your kids back from the court. You know what I mean? Religion will. So I think that, I think that whole spirituality versus religion debate is very similar to this, in terms of witchcraft as a religion debate. It comes from people's colloquial understandings of the word religion as sort of being this organized fascist kind of authoritative thing, when in reality,
It means
in
there's
the legal sense,
something with substance.
the word, right, but you don't have to even get into it. Like whether you're defining witchcraft colloquially in some fascist sense, or you're defining it in all the myriad ways, the Oxford Dictionary has multiple definitions, more than any other dictionary. None of that matters. At the end of the day, if the court's about to take your kids away, hallelujah, praise Jesus, I'm a religion. Spirituality isn't going to get your kids back saying, I'm a Wiccan, I'm a witch, I'm not a religion.
I say all the time, I'm religious, not spiritual.
I want to say what I say when I'm pressed by anyone. I say I'm a high priestess in an Alexandrian coven, which is a religious practice of witchcraft. I am that.
Which is a very clear-cut statement.
And
Well,
I don't say I'm spiritual.
If
Yes,
you're saying
I am
you're
also
a priest
spiritual.
or a priestess and saying you're not in a religion, no offense, but you are a bit of an idiot.
No, I say I'm a high priestess of a specific
you
religion.
can't be a priest or priestess not in a religion. That's those words.
Or a religious practice, you could even say.
But I
Whatever
also say
you want, however you want to buff up the sadness.
I also say I'm spiritual, and I understand people's spirituality.
I'm
or
not
spiritual
anti
practice.
the word. I want to find this
But I
video
do-
called the spirit. Rosie showed it as the spiritual guy or whatever it's.
I don't know.
I redefine myself, though. When people say they're spiritual, I say, yes, I am too, but I am a high priestess
I'm
of the
spiritual.
Alexandrian
I
tradition
just
of witchcraft.
don't necessarily think the word really has any connection to witchcraft. Can a witch use it? Sure. Sure, why not?
Can a shaman use it?
Sure,
Yes.
why
Can a
not?
Reiki
Can a
healer
Catholic
use
priest
it?
use
Can a
it?
Catholic
Yes.
priest use it?
Well,
Yes.
absolutely.
It comes from them, so.
Yes. But I don't think it's really, spiritual implies a religious act, but you can't, you can belong to a spirituality, which is also implying a religion, right? But being spiritual is an act. Can
I be just more blunt about all this? Yeah. To me, it boils down to aesthetics. If you describe yourself as spiritual and not religious,
you're fat.
No, I'm fat. I don't care about that.
Yeah, but you're a fat guy.
I don't give a shit about that. I'm not fat phobic. But I think that for me, it does boil down on some level to aesthetics in the sense that if I tell people I'm religious and not spiritual, which is a line I use all the time, I wrote it in Mother, I'm religious, not spiritual, they're not going to ask me to judge their crystals or read their cards. You know what I mean? So it gives me a power to say I'm religious.
Sacred
I think it empowers your priesthood too.
It empowers my priesthood.
Sacred is a fat word and holy is a thin word.
Can I be honest? I really hate this. Can we not do this, please?
I've always identified spirituality. Levi, you know what crowd you hang out with. I've always identified spirituality as a New Age word.
Agreed.
So I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it. Now, that being said, when I was younger and involved in the church, I heard it used in a different way. So I don't have an issue with the word spiritual. it doesn't belong in the context of witchcraft to me. It's not in our
clarity.
It's not
I
in our
am
liturgy.
fat, so I can comment on fat.
Well, you can, yeah.
I think it's interesting.
I'm gay fat.
What you just said, Brian. In the church, for example, that word had a deeper,
yes,
in Catholic culture, you had a spiritual director.
But it's also a part of African American church culture.
Yeah. But in
called the hymns, the spiritual hymns.
In Christianity, a spiritual director meant that they were in charge of the deeper.
It's not originally a non-religious term.
Talking with spirit.
It's a religious term that got turned into something saying, "Well, yes, I believe in stuff, but I don't have any structure." That's basically what it says. And witchcraft does have a structure. It may not be as strict as a Catholic structure or something like that.
But historically, what it meant was it was a reference to the practices that were more internal and soul-based, like prayer, like contemplative prayer.
All right, darlings. So we are to our last 10 minutes. So we don't have time for another question. This crowd's not going to answer a question in 10 minutes. So I'm going to give us the rundown. But before I do, let's just all have a closing statement. Quick 2-minute closing statement about the show. So I'm going to say, first of all, I love the topic of the show. I think the first question was the best question. And I love the idea that we're visiting this because witchcraft is a religion. It may be a very small religion. It may not be an ancient Stone Age religion. But guess what? None of the others are either. So it's a group of people who found God in a certain way and work rituals in a certain way and share a common set of beliefs. And this religion has inspired Pottery Barn to sell oracle cards.
Which they do.
Yes.
So it does have an impact on the world. We'd like it to be better than that. But, that's when you get your religion being sold. That's called cultural appropriation because witchcraft does have a culture, a religion, and a set of beliefs. It's not an ethnic culture. It's an internal, practiced, realized culture that's gone on for a few generations now. So that's my last closing thing. The rest of you.
Ellie, what would you like to end on?
We're here for you. I know this is a crazy world. There's a lot of people out there seeking things for themselves in the spiritual world, in a religious world, in a divine world, your own power, your own health, your own mental health. We're here for you. That's why we're doing this show. We want to answer questions and show that there are traditional, longer-standing paths and patterns of religion, of witchcraft. And we've been doing it for many years before I started. And it's really here for you to learn and grow. And I hope we can find some new people in new places to start initiatory witchcraft covens and study. And if we could take over the world, it'd be wonderful.
It wouldn't.
It'd be scary.
It wouldn't be wonderful.
We would rule with wine. No. We would rule with wine.
Christian, what would you like to end on?
Well, as someone that really eschewed the idea and just rejected religion as a term for so long, I've really come around to understanding that it's all part of a big picture. I personally feel that the core belief, to answer the question I asked, the core belief of witchcraft is the goddess as an empowering form of magic. I think that magic and witchcraft are inextricably intertwined. I don't feel one exists without, magic and religion and the gods. I don't think any of it exists without the other. So for me, this initiation has brought me full circle, and I embrace the magic, the spirit, the gods, the religion, the spirituality, all of it together. It's all inseparable for me.
It's great to see that for you,
answer.
Christian. I do
Blessed
too.
be.
Blessed be, Christian.
Blessed be.
And we all see it.
Last but not least, the apocalypse.
What I end on.
The Duchess of the Apocalypse.
The
The Duchess of the
Duchess.
Apocalypse.
She got something to say.
I would say there are just different camps, everyone. Like, there just are. There are different camps of people who are having experiences on this planet. We are not all the same. We're not all doing the same thing. We are alike in dignity. We are alike in equity. We are alike in the necessity of freedom and the necessity of self-realization. I think that is part and parcel of any healthy culture.
Alike in humanity.
Alike in humanity, exactly. I think for a very long time on this planet, in various cultures, there have been people who have felt something at the center of their being that feels infinite, that feels intelligent, that feels powerful, that feels connected in, a very real way to other beings. I think contemporary witchcraft, in the way we practice, is a doorway to that experience, and I would call that religious. I don't think it is separable from the same thing that is happening in incredible mystical writings from other religions. Mm-hmm. I like to think that we are the closest thing in history I find to my religion outside of Christian mysticism are the mystery cults.
Yes.
They just are. I think I love the mystery cults. I love reading about them, and I think we are a mystery cult. And I think if you're hungry for a revelation, then this is a powerful way to have it.
We give it to you in your body, mind, and soul.
And you can find it in my book, Initiation into Witchcraft, found on iTunes.
Yes, you can.
Anyway, so next week is our last ambush interview of the season. Mm-hmm. And then we will go on to episode 12, which will be our grand finale. We won't have a guest for that one. We haven't quite planned what we'll do. We always do something weird. But our last guest of the season will be Kerrigan Griffin. He is a high priest of the Alexandrian tradition who resides in Portugal. And he will be our ambush interviewer next week. And we're very excited about that. So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for joining. Christian.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you for joining.
Fabulous
and your topic was
questions.
wonderful. Great questions. Very insightful. All of you have a great week, and may the goddess be your guide.
Blessings.